facilitator for this meeting. Representative Smith, thank you.
Thank you, Tracy, and I feel honored to have such a wide range of dignitaries here tonight to listen to what we have to offer. And I didn't pay her to say all those things about that, but I probably ought to buy her supper after a while. But thanks for everyone coming tonight. I know Friday nights are usually busy, but we're looking at something that would be an opportunity, and it is an opportunity for South Arkansas to create jobs and to be able to see population shifts come back our way. Instead, if you noticed the census materials the other day, all the counties in South Arkansas lost except Miller County. And over my part of the world, Union County, Ouachita County, I have parts of both counties to represent. We lost more in Union County than we did in Ouachita County. And so we need to do things that would help create jobs, and this is something that I've been interested in since before I was sworn in my first session in 2009. We went on the field trips to Hallsville, Texas, and we'll show you some of those slides in a little bit and let you see what it's really about. But if I could then allow, Richard, would you like to be next and let you come and show the economic impact? Richard is a gentleman that if he tells you it's yes, it's yes. It's not maybe. He's really good with his data, and I depend on him heavily for the projections that he shows us economically in our efforts there at the legislature. And he's been with us on these trips, and I'll just turn it over to Richard Wilson right now and let him show his slide presentation. Thank you, Richard.
Let me tell you a little bit about the Bureau of Legislative Research where I work. We're a nonpartisan central service agency for both the House and Senate. And our job is to present objective factual information. So I'm not an advocate here tonight, but it looks like it because the numbers are so good. Just want to make sure you know that. The first slide is actually in honor of one of our representatives who tried to get this. So that's as far as he got. Sanders, good guy. These first two slides are still on, and I probably ought to update this, but we're looking at coming out of a recession. Okay, so what this is every economic downturn we've had since the Great Depression. There's 13 of them there. By the classical definition in economics, you have 2 consecutive quarters of negative GDP growth. That's the recession. So how long does it last? This is terms of duration in months. So you can see that this particular recession we're coming out of right now is the longest and the toughest. We're looking at 4 billion tons of known reserves. Representative Hickerson mentioned the term 9 billion tons, and we think that's out there. We're pretty sure that's out there. We need some more research done, but 4 billion for sure. 4 billion is relatively easy to get to. There is a mine currently operating in Ackerman, Mississippi called Red Hills. And what we did is we took the economics from that mine and we did a play like, and we put one in Clark County and we put one in Dallas County, and we wanted to look at the economic effect on those 2 counties for a mine site. So each mine provides in each county 200 employees full-time, 14.5 million payroll. Those wages are pretty good, averaging $20 or more. Skill positions are above those rates, and you're spending $135 million to develop each mine. They're purchasing 18 million of supplies from the local economy and providing county tax revenues of $600,000. The landowners do pretty well here. They get to clear their loblolly and make that money and then make more on the resource. Sales tax revenue for the state and a little bit of severance tax as well. So let's see what that effect would be in Clark County, which has some good economics going forward already. Those are the one-time impacts. We're more interested in the ongoing impacts. So we have a total employment of 467. That would be the mine site, that would be the micro refinery, that would be all the secondary and third level jobs that are created along the development of these economics. total payroll of 23 million, and gross state product, additional incremental new product of 52 million a year. Currently, the economics in Clark County look like this. Total employment is now 10,000, and gross state product runs 622 million is the estimate for 2011. So if you look at those ratios, what percentage increase would you see for those numbers if you had a mine site in Clark County? You can see 467 divided by 10,000 is 4.67% in employment immediately, and 8.36% in production. Good numbers for a county that does relatively well anyway. Now let's look at those same numbers in Dallas County, which doesn't quite have the economics of Clark County. You can see those are all the same numbers, but the base in Dallas is much smaller. So adding 467 jobs to the 3,340 they have now is 14% increase just for the mine site, and gross state product 28%. I looked at Miller County this morning. It would be 2.5% on employment and 4.8% on gross state product. Okay, we've seen lignite in the news before, and Texas, Louisiana, Mississippi all have lignite mines, and what they do is they dig it up and they burn it. And they burn it for electricity generation. There's better coal for such purposes. It's drier coal. It comes out of Wyoming, and that's what the Arkansas plants use. It's Wyoming coal. They train it in box cars and coal cars. But the lignite, if you try to turn it to a liquid, is a much better coal because there's already a lot of hydrogen involved. It's 30 and 40%. So the objective is, there's research going on that takes southwestern lignite, turns it into synthetic crude oil, sends it to the refinery, and makes excellent diesel fuel. There's been some advances at the University of Texas system at the Arlington campus, and they have created a experimental micro refinery, and it's moving from experimental to production. And they're talking with some big names out of Houston to try to get this thing running. But it would look something like that. It's placed at the mine site because you can literally dig Arkansas lignite before lunch, have it turned to synthetic crude, and on its way to line oil in a tanker truck in El Dorado in the afternoon. This micro refinery is limited to about 1,000 barrels per day. And it's placed right at the mine site. You can do it in tanker trucks. You don't need railroad. So you can't get more than 1,000 barrels a day, so what you do is replicate. You can put 10 or 20 of these at the mine site and therefore get 10 to 20,000 barrels a day. All right, the economics of the conversion. We've looked at the economics of the mine. There's even bigger numbers once you get to crude oil, as you can imagine. So let's go with our conservative known number of 4 billion tons. UT Arlington currently can produce 2 barrels per ton. Maybe 3, but right now 2. So if we've got 4 billion tons, you're looking at 8 billion barrels times $80 is the current market price. Cairo settled down a little bit, so we're coming back down to about 80. It was up there at $91 for a week or two. $640 billion of potential. That's not a bad number for South Arkansas. University of Arkansas at Fayetteville, in a big study, big news release, told you about Fayetteville Shale a few years ago and the potential up there. I don't know if any of you remember that big number. It was 18 billion. So if you had 10,000 tons per day, that's 20,000 barrels per mine. you're running 2 mine sites, you do it for $40 a barrel, sell it for 80, half your annual revenue is profit. So at 4 billion tons, if you're pulling out 20,000 tons per day, you're only going to last 200,000 days. And of course, that's plenty of time because you see that's a little over 500 years worth of resource in South Arkansas. So not a problem. These pictures, I'm going to let Representative Smith follow me and tell you more about these. This is actual photographs from some active mine sites. You can see this particular vein is not very deep at all, easy to get to. Reclamation, very well done. There's a lot of questions about environment and reclamation, and he can answer those for you. Here's a 15-year-old reclamation. You can see the power plant in the background. This is the Red Hills mine I told you about. You can see part of the mine on the upper left has been reclaimed, and then they move out and work a section at a time. There's that section, 6 to 12 months, already reclaimed, and roads built on it. And in this particular area, they even have a reservoir. They can grow grass, they can build your, throw your loblolly back, they can leave you in a reservoir, whatever you need to do. This is an old photo from the early 80s at the Benton South test pit. You can see very shallow there where they got the lignite vein. Our geologist, Ed Ratchford, at the Geological Survey in Arkansas, sent 2 samples to UT Arlington, one from Malvern and one from this Benton pit from the 80s. The Malvern sample oxidized and turned to ash. This lignite, if you put it in the truck and drive all day, you'll ruin it. You've got to get it, take it while it's wet, and convert it. So they've had it under wraps for all these years, and the Malvern sample wound up no good. The Benton sample, however, the engineers at Arlington told us it was the best lignite they had yet seen. And it didn't even need any cleaning before going to the conversion process. They said it made excellent synthetic crude, and they would love to take all with us. And another test pit, you can see the veins in Dallas County. That's the economics of it. I'll be glad to take any questions if there are any at this point. Otherwise, yes, sir.
Is this all primarily what you're talking about, strip mining, or will it be the old underground mining? What is the concept on that?
You can call it what you want. It's mining that is surface level, considered surface level, and today's technology provides a much more profitable situation. Now, there's people that are opposed to strip mining and those operations, and there will never be strip mining in Arkansas, but look around, it's already there. We can show you one about Little Rock Airport. You fly over it every day, right there by the runways. So we just want to do it a little more. If you can imagine Texas Arlington getting the equivalent of a patent on this process and moving to a production stage on these micro refineries, selling that patent to a big name in Houston, Texas, there's a few of them down there, that are looking at making profits in the size that I just showed you on $40 to $80 a barrel conversion. That's a lot of money. And what the Vice Chancellor of Legal Affairs at Austin is doing is he's got right now a gag order on that entire system. And they're negotiating. And what Texas is going to do is create a royalty for them on every barrel of this thing. So, once again, the university is going to be just fine.
How deep did you go down? How deep is that coal where you play out?
Well, you can see that one's a lot deeper than the previous slide. That previous slide was only 30 feet. Some of them are very shallow. I guess they get as deep as 300.
Some is 8 foot below the surface, but most of it is economic economically feasible to mine. It's less than 150 feet. And that's what we're looking at here in making this pitch to you, is that if it weren't profitable, then we wouldn't even be thinking about it. But you remember in 1973 when we had the oil embargo? I do. And gasoline went from 39 cents a gallon to $1.19 overnight. And we were panicking, trying to figure out a way to fix things. And so we began to look at lignite and other areas of energy. Excuse me. We had things going pretty good for a while until we hugged the sheik and everything got back to normal and oil went back to $3 a barrel. And so it wasn't economically feasible to make this transition at that point in time. Since then, we have begun to conserve energy and do our best with smaller vehicles, more economically feasible, to get more miles per gallon. The industry says we got to get X number of miles per gallon, on and on. So Americans have begun to use less energy, and yet we're still driving, but our numbers, if you look at the chart, we've leveled off in what we're bringing in from international sources on our oil demand. But where is the price then? What's making it stay up? Well, you're watching the third world countries in India, Pakistan, China, those instead of riding on a bicycle or an old mule or a camel, now they're buying cars. And so what we could conserve and drive the price of oil back down because it's supply and demand again, they're buying every drop we don't buy. And so the price is staying up there. With the economist that Richard was referencing has already told us from U of A, we'll never see $40 a barrel oil anymore. In fact, he said we're going to see $120 a barrel oil. And on the way down here this afternoon, I had to look to buy gasoline under $3 a gallon. I managed to find some out here, but it's $2.95.9. But anyway, we're projected to see gasoline go to $5 a gallon in the next 24 months if you've been watching the media. What's all that about? Well, there's only a limited amount of known reserves that we will allow people to drill for and to get that fossil fuel out of the ground. This is a source of crude that's equivalent to West Texas crude. That's the benchmark for oil in America. It's cleaner than what we're buying from that crazy guy down there in Venezuela and from other places. And so if they get to the point where they don't like Americans anymore, they can cut the valve off, and we're back to 1973, several years after the fact. When are we going to ever wake up and create, as Americans and innovators that we are, another way and give ourselves some energy independence? And we've begun to think differently in the last few months, because I'll tell you the truth, I don't like to be held for ransom by someone else. Why do we not go do this? Because we've got opportunity to get rid of our pine timber. We're not building houses, but we can sell it for slash or whatever, use it for fuel in our boilers or whatever, and the landowner can get his return on his timber and then dig the mineral, and they'll plant it back in the timber if that's what he wants to do, or if he wants to leave it grassland or make it housing developments. It improves the quality and the value of his land in the first place. This is something that we need to think about. You know, we've begun to think about, everything's got to be the same old, same old. I don't believe so. They talk about thinking outside the bun. You know, you see that advertisement. I want to think outside the box. I want to think outside the old way and let something happen that's not only good for our energy independence, but it's also a job creator. And when you might say, well, how are we going to go about this? What's it going to take to kick this off? A small number called $3 million. Now, in the 2009 session, we were able to do 75 additional test wells for $1.5 million. We had a federal energy grant offered to us for $550,000, and the legislature approved the appropriation for $1.5 million. But we didn't get our $1 million fund added to the kitty. So the Federal Energy Commission said, we'll take our money somewhere else to someone else that's interested in it. But why did they come to Arkansas in the first place? Because they know the value of our mineral. They know that this is another way to give us our energy independence. So the task that we're trying to develop now, and as Representative Hickerson mentioned, that I became the champion or whatever, I could see that in all the campaigns that I've been involved in, I've always talked about job creation and helping our young people stay at home. We do a great job educating. I think we do as good as anyone else. We can measure our students against anyone. But I have family now working in Oklahoma and in Texas and Alabama and other places because they got an education here in Arkansas, and we did not supply the jobs to back it up. It takes education and economic development. Which came first, the chicken or the egg? We've got the way to teach and to train our youngsters, but we're not following through with the job creation, so they're going other places. And there goes our population. Our churches are suffering, our schools are suffering, and you noted the census data the other day, our voting power is suffering. We're going to be dominated by Northwest Arkansas. I love those people, but not to the extent that they get what they want, and folks in South Arkansas are left begging. And that's where things are really at. So how can we change that? It's by creating jobs down here. When we go and open these kinds of things up, we'll put people to work, as Richard mentioned, at $25 an hour and greater. When we were at the Hallsville site, we were looking at people that were drawing $30 an hour, and they were doing things that they like to do anyway. They're operating heavy equipment. So when the plant shuts down and Uncle George at 48 years of age finds out his job's gone away, most of them don't go back to higher education. They try to find something else. They can go to work driving heavy equipment, doing what they were already doing anyway, and things are happy people are living here. I know I'm talking about a dream world, but this is the dream world we can have. Okay, here's some outline of what we did. We'll show you the trip to Hallsville, Texas, and lignite testing, and then direct liquefaction will be explained, and I'll just kind of scan on through these right here. We know lignite can be made into electricity, gasoline, ultra-clean diesel, jet fuel, synthetic crude oil, and that's the avenue we're pursuing, natural gas, and even other economically important byproducts. The Sabine mine that we went to in Hallsville, Texas, December 19, 2008, you saw that a moment ago. There's the kinds of equipment that Uncle George could operate. Those trucks haul enormous loads out of that pit. That big crane up there is operating. That's a huge piece of equipment. They're not digging the mineral with that. They're only taking the overburden off. And here's the truck that we rode down in, and there you see some water in the bottom. I said, what do y'all do with that water? We divert that to other places. We don't allow the water to become contaminated. We'll pump it off to an off-site holding pit. When we get through, we're filling that trench back in. We put whatever does not convert to crude oil where it came from, and then put the overburden back on it. The last 30 foot or so will be the topsoil and what was there in the first place. And it's cultivated. You all have a tiller in the garden. You take the tiller out there and you work the ground. It makes the turnips grow bigger. It makes the potatoes get larger because you've opened the soil up. So in doing this, we're renovating the soil and making it more productive. This is what actually takes the mineral out. That machinery is there on the right-hand side is similar to what I can compare it to when we renovate our highways. And we go and strip off the little asphalt. It digs it up and offshoots it into that truck right there. Again, in Hallsville, they're making this into electricity. But this is the kind of equipment you're seeing here. They told us that they can't keep people working in the oil industry or taking them away into the lignite industry. So they're having trouble having people operate their situation. Now, if any of y'all have any cows, billy goats or whatever, you'd like to have that kind of grass growing in your field. I'd sure like to have a hayfield like that. There's the plant that we toured, and this is 3 to 5 years from that point. Grass is there that's growing without additional fertilization. They planted it back because that's what the landowner wanted. Okay? That's an ideal situation. Here's another picture you saw a while ago with the reservoirs and timber planted back. I asked, well, y'all must have really put the fertilizer to get that many rolls of hay, those big rolls. They said, we didn't put any fertilization on. The taproot can get deeper to get the mineral and the moisture that it needs to grow. Yeah, like I said, it renovates and makes that property worth more. This landowner wanted it back in a very situation. There again is the plant, and this is 15 years since it was dug up. Okay? Then here's the plant over at Choctaw, Mississippi, Choctaw County, Mississippi, and we had a program on Channel 11 last Thursday evening, 10 o'clock news. They went over there. They invited me to go, and I had pages in the Capitol that day, and I couldn't go. So they said, well, we'll go ahead and make our presentation. We'll do an interview and get some data from you, and we're going to make some viewpoints. If you didn't see that, you can go to the KPHB website and see a part of that program that they presented on the 10 o'clock news. They showed it again last Friday morning at 6 o'clock in the morning, and they showed people that were impressed with the dollar value it put into their economy. They've got money to build hospitals, schools. There was one lady that didn't like it because it changed the way her land looked for a period of time, but they planted it back, and she was just, well, not everybody's happy with anything that's different. And I guess I could sum it up with that. But we need to look at what will the benefit be. We're not destroying the land site. I asked them, I said, what if Grandpa came back from the dead, he'd been dead 50 years? Would he notice and recognize the farm after it's been renovated? They said, yeah, it'll look just like it did before. I said, how are you going to do that? I got a lot of questions. He said, we take a GPS reading, and we'll note where the swales and ridges are. We'll put it back exactly like it was, or if you want it changed, we'll do that. And some of them want reservoirs, some want timber, some want grassland, or whatever. If it was going to destroy the environment, I'd go home right now. But I'm convinced that it won't. I've been to sites at Hallsville, Texas. I've seen them in South Dakota. I've seen what they do. If people in Texas and Louisiana and Mississippi can do it, why can't we in Arkansas do the same thing? I tend to think we're a little bit smarter than they are. Now, don't get offended at me if you're from Texas, please. But I got kin folks over there, so I can say that. But, you know, we can do it as good as they can. The Federal Mining Act in 1977 says if you dig it up, you've got to put it back in as good as or better condition than it was. So we don't have to worry about someone coming in and robbing and devastating our countryside and running off. How can we prevent that? They have to have an insurance policy equal to whatever they're going to dig up as a bonding company holding that says if you default, then we're going to make sure that the property gets put back like it was. So we've got safety measures already there. This is that mine in Ackerman, Mississippi, and an early restoration. That looks pretty good to me. Here's a lake that they put in. We saw ducks on the ponds over in Hallsville, Texas. We saw wildlife in there. And here again is the picture from the 1980s. That's what it looks like. I don't know, did y'all bring any samples from Magnolia tonight? I've been handing those out everywhere I go, and I'm right out. But anyway, lignite is softer than the old number 2 coal. You can squeeze it and ruffle it up, and it'll crumble on you. Well, that's good for what we want to do because it's easier broken down. I'm not a chemist or a biologist or anything like that, but when you put it into that mini refinery that Richard showed you a while ago at 300 degrees Celsius, about 500 degrees, 500 pounds per square inch, in less than 5 minutes it'll flow out of a pipe. They've been improving on what Adolf Hitler had during the Second World War. Grandma used to call it coal oil. They made fuel out of coal and out of lignite. Hitler couldn't get to the North Sea deposits, so he said, we got to do something to run our war machine, so they used lignite. It's the Fischer-Tropsch technique that was invented in 1922. We've been seeing improvements to that, and UT Arlington is the latest ones with the greatest improvement to it, but they're continually tweaking that. And as Richard mentioned, they know they can get 2 barrels per ton, and we're conservative in saying that, but in most cases, most of the Arkansas mineral will probably show closer to 3 barrels per ton. And so that's where we go back to our need for additional test sites. The drillings that were done in the 70s and 80s is proprietary information. The energy companies were getting that for their own benefit, and here's another picture. I talked to some of the people, and we were at Benton County a few weeks ago. They said I was a driver in that truck, and they took that picture. And I saw what it did, and we need to bring it on. And some of those people up there on Interstate 30 said, we don't really care if you dig it's not the mineral that we're going to gain from because we sell hydraulic cylinders, we sell trucks and trailers, and this is the add-on economy that will grow with this. And when you put payroll dollars to work, I teach an economics course for SAU Tech when I'm not doing anything else, and that's online right now this semester, and so I'm doing microeconomics. The bottom line is if you pay somebody a payroll dollar, it's going to turn 7 times in a local economy. You're going to buy a loaf of bread, some diesel fuel, gallon of gas, put some pictures in the annual for the kids at school, maybe make a payment on a house. All of that happens because that's what happens in our economy. When we put people to work, our economy will grow. And that's what we're doing, and that's what we need to do so much here. These are repetitive of what Richard showed you a while ago. The folks in Dallas County, I've got a letter from Spartan here asking the governor to release the money from Laney Fight, Saline County, Jimmy Jones, Dallas County. We received a notice from Union County yesterday. Their quorum court met and unanimously approved a resolution asking the governor to proceed with this. I'm not mad at anyone, and I'm sure not trying to make an enemy out of the governor. I like the man. He's a good fellow. I met with him last May at a fundraiser there in East Camden. I said, Governor, you need to help us with lignite. He said, Gary, I want you to keep me informed on that. Well, you know me, I didn't take that as a no. That sounded like he was interested in it, and he's still interested in it. He met with the county judges this past Monday, if I'm not mistaken, and he said something to the same effect. He said he was open to lignite, but he has some concerns about the environment. Okay, we know that the people in Texas and Louisiana and out in the South Dakota mines and Mississippi, they're putting it back, and they can do it right. We've got an entity here in Arkansas. If you're in the oil business, or if you're in the cattle business, or have a confined feed-out operation, you'll know them best by hearing the words ADEQ, Arkansas Department of Environmental Quality. They'll monitor and make sure that what we do will be according to the rule and the law. They went with us to the trip to Arlington. This just shows where these things are, where the deposits are, and I'm not a geologist, but the lowest point is the Trinity Group, and that's the deepest level. That's over close to Monticello area, and there we go. That's what I want to show you. Right here, the Shea Basin is a coal bed, the natural gas potential. That's over here where it's down to about 3,000 to 4,000 feet deep. That will make methane gas. It wouldn't be economically feasible to mine that, but you can drill a hole down in there and produce methane gas. You see, the largest deposits, as you noted, the Gulf Coastal Plain follows I-30 and up to about Little Rock, and then goes on up into the Boot Hill, Missouri. So the guys in Clay County up there have it as well. But the easiest to get to is in our part of the world, south of Interstate 30. And so this gives us something, and when we go through this process, you note the South Arkansas oil fields right here. That's over in Union County. We've got them in Columbia County. There's some in Miller and Lafayette County. But some of those are getting closer to being depleted. If we can take this and capture that in that mini refinery, we can capture the carbon and sequester it and pump it back into those deposits and make that old thick, gooey stuff like molasses on a January day when it's snowing become like maple syrup on the 4th of July. That carbon sequestration will allow us to have enhanced oil recovery, and that's called EOR in the terminology that they'll utilize here. And here again is the study groups. That's not the only places, but these sites that are quote on the off here are where leases were obtained in the 70s and 80s. There was a gasoline plant being constructed near Sparkman, Arkansas by Exxon until they found out that they could buy oil again at $3 a barrel. And so it just wasn't worth it. And you would, if you owned Exxon stock, you wouldn't have wanted to do that at that time either. But now with the price as it is, it's economically feasible to move forward. Okay, this is a piece of legislation that was passed in the 07 session. Our friend Bruce Mallett from over at Magnolia was instrumental in getting this created, Act 641, and that helped set up the pilot program that SAU Magnolia has, and Dr. Schroeder is here to speak on that. We want to continue that. Your research center is over there that will not only talk about lignite, but also wind, solar, and nuclear energy, and that's right in our home area. And so we've got some things that have begun before, but we need to continue with this. Okay? Here's the Great Plains fuel plant in Beulah, North Dakota. That plant's been operating since the early 80s, making fuel from lignite, and quite an operation. I think about 650 people there full time. They produce 53 billion cubic feet of natural gas every year, enough to heat 500,000 homes and businesses, and they capture 50% of the carbon sequestration at a profit and sell it to a Canadian oil and gas operator for that enhanced oil recovery. And it's the cleanest operating plant according to the North Dakota Department of Health that they have in the state. All right, they can, from those byproducts, and this is when we capture that in that refinery, we can capture the ammonium sulfate, the phenol, the prussic acid, liquid nitrogen, methanol, naphtha, xenon, and krypton gases that we're using in these little curly Q light fixtures that we're having now. So all of these are byproducts that are for sale and help in the industry that we have. We can do that without worrying about it going up a smokestack. There is a Canadian oil deposit that was considered depleted. And now that they have this pipeline from that North Dakota plant, they're pumping it into this area, and it's the Williston Basin there. That gives you an overview of where it locates, and that's in Canada. But look here. Now that plant, that oil field is producing 20,000 barrels a day. And it was a depleted oil reserve because they're capturing that carbon and pumping it into that project. That's just another byproduct of what we can do. We can't leave a single drop of oil in the ground, in my opinion. We are a fossil fuel nation. There'll be electric cars and electric trains and all those things, but right now I don't think they've got an extension cord long enough to run an 18-wheeler from Dallas to Little Rock. And so we've got to worry about doing what's right for now and develop those other innovations as they come along. Now, the UT Arlington has converted Texas lignite to synthetic crude, and it's equivalent in quality to West Texas Intermediate. They're looking at direct liquefaction process, which is a hydrogen donor solution. There we go. 400 degrees Celsius and 1,500 to 3,000 psi was what was being accomplished earlier. And the cold fragments are hydrocracked. As it's already got its moisture, Richard mentioned that a while ago, we can add additional moisture and make it develop into a liquid that will flow out of the pipeline at the end of the refinery. Okay? And here's where it goes into a reactor at 380 degrees Celsius, 500 psi for less than 5 minutes. It will flow out of the pipe. What does not convert goes back in one more time, and then if it does not convert, it goes back into the pit at the level that it came out from. So we're not changing the location at all. They've got a 20 by 20 by 20 mini refinery. Now, that's not going to be left out there after the mining operation goes away to watch a rusting down operation. It can be trucked in by semi and can produce 1,000 barrels per day from that very site. It's easier to convert to liquid than higher ranking coals because it's easier to squeeze it or make it into a liquid. And we can see here that the overall objective, as you showed you a while ago, is to get into that middle section, synthetic crude. We don't have to build a refinery. We've got one in El Dorado that has 80,000 barrel per day capability right now. They're willing to go to 120,000 barrel per day, which is jobs, and they've already enhanced their ability there at the refinery. So that's already there. We've got a market for our product. And we've got the raw material. We just need to get it started. Okay? In 2007, we had 1.5 million acres that were covering South Arkansas lignite that we know of. The geologists and support staff have got models to show where and part of that thickness and depth, but we want to dig or drill new cores to get the value, not for electrical power generation that they were looking at earlier, but to make it converted to liquid crude. He's near the surface, and well, that tells you a little bit more about what I've already spoken on here. We're seeing that the UT Arlington people are saying that it's going to take about $3 million to complete commercial testing to see how easily it will convert to synthetic fuel. If we can get the funding for the project, then this can happen and be completed in 3 years. That's not saying that we couldn't see results in less than 3 years. Now, why, and I know you probably want to ask this question, I'm going to beat you to the draw. Why do we need to put the money in ourselves? Why doesn't the industry come do it? Somebody want to ask that question? Did I beat you to that one? I got an answer for you. The Fulton plant over here has had all kinds of legal problems since its inception. And lawyers are getting rich. And Brother Steele, I'm not against your venue. I appreciate what you have. He's quite an attorney. But anyway, that's made everyone outside the state of Arkansas leery of anything that might have a possibility of contaminating anyone. They're going to burn coal in that plant Fulton. So they're sitting around the borders of Arkansas watching Arkansans and what we're going to do with our mineral. They know we've got a good mineral. The Federal Energy Commission knows we've got a good mineral. That's why they offered that $550,000 grant in the 2009 session. But we've got to take the initiative. Do you usually see John Deere come in and set up a plant for assembling tractors and then you build an industrial park? No, you usually build the industrial park first, then John Deere comes in or whomever else, and they start their factories because you made the investment. We in Arkansas need to make a $3 million investment to let the outside world know that we're really serious about this and that we can create something. Now, this is not on the slide, but remember when we encouraged Hewlett-Packard to come to Conway? How much money we put into the effort? $50 million for 500 jobs. That works out to $100,000 per job the way I figure that. Now, let's just be a little simple, and that's the kind of person I am. My $3 million effort that we need, if we can get these drill cores started, that would open up an opportunity for 400 people to go start a mine. $3 million divided by 400 people is $7,500 per job. A lot of difference. And those people, those 400 people would be making close to $30 per hour because that machinery will not shut down. It'll operate 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. They'll just change operator. But let's just be simple with our math. And those 400 people will work at $30 an hour for 2,000 hours a year. That's $60,000 each. Remember that's 7 times in the local economy? $60,000 for 400 people is, I believe, $24 million. Am I right, Governor? Is that pretty close? on a $3 million investment. Now, any bankers in the room? Isn't that a pretty good deal? It's an awesome opportunity. But how do we get this going? Well, our little old town hall meetings we've been having around the state, and we started this back in November, December time frame. I don't know, Tammy, how many have we had? I've lost count. 6, 7. We had another in Fort Ice today. I wasn't there, but there was at least 7. But we've been taking this to the people. And we've listened to what the people said November the 2nd of 2010. And the best way I can summarize it, it was Americans and Arkansans particularly said, we want jobs. We want people working. And we want less taxes. But we want these things to happen. Now, the $3 million, where would we get that? There's an economic development fund that we have in Arkansas. That's what it's for, developing economies in Arkansas. If we can ask and receive permission to receive that $3 million, we can turn it into $24 million in 1 year's time and repeat that on and on again. I had some people at Hampton said, I don't really like your presentation. I said, why not? And they said, because you didn't show one in Hampton. I said, well, we can put a mine wherever. That's just a what if, because of what we know from before. If you really get to looking at it, Calhoun County may be the mother lode of it all. They've got probably more known areas that we have than any other place. I called Steve Anthony this Wednesday because we were to meet with the governor Wednesday afternoon after adjournment at 2 o'clock or upon adjournment. Well, we got into a little lengthy debate in the chamber, and we didn't get out of there till about 4:45, so the governor couldn't wait for us, and he said, we'll meet with y'all at 10:30 Monday. But meanwhile, that morning, I had talked to Steve Anthony. I said, Steve, what would it do for Anthony Timberlands? He said, we've got tracts of timber that we know that are not environmentally at question. There's no rivers or creeks that would be interfering with that. I said, you've got large enough, say 2,000 acres or whatever. He said, yeah, we do. We've got a lot of land in those areas that would be beneficial. We'd like to see this move forward. Murphy Timber, Plum Creek, the former International Paper Company, and you probably own mineral rights on your property too. But where the mineral right is totally owned by the owner, in my opinion, would be where they would first go and develop. There wouldn't be any worries of having people like Brother Steele over here working and negotiating mineral agreements or whatever, because they have that already known. Now, when I want to protect Grandma's farm and the burial plot, and if there's lignite underneath it, I want the surface owner to have a say-so of what happens. I've asked the question, does the surface owner have any rights? And if I'm not a lawyer, but in reading that it says damages. That's a little word that's got a lot of punch. If you're not wanting it dug on your land, you can sit down and negotiate with them for what happens. But unless you're a large landholder, they're probably not going to worry with you for another 100 or 200 years. At 548 years worth of value on 4 billion tons, it'll be a long time. Our great-great-great-grandkids might have to worry about it. But again, in reading the Bible of the day, and I read through a story that I knew, but I'd forgotten a little bit how it was. Remember the city of Samaria was under siege by the Assyrians, and they were starving to death, and their technique was working because people inside the city didn't have anything to eat. And there were 4 lepers. I thought it was 3. I got my numbers wrong, but I read it again. It's 4 lepers that were sitting outside. Lepers couldn't go in among the rest of them because their disease is contagious. They were sitting outside, and they said, we're going to die anyway, but we're hungry. There's no food in the city. They won't throw us any scraps over the wall because they don't have any to throw over. Why don't we head toward the Assyrians, and they just might have some scraps left that we could get. In other words, they said, why sit we here until we die? And so they got up and they started walking toward the Assyrians. Y'all read it. You know what I'm saying. This is L.A., Lower Arkansas Revelation here. They started walking toward the Assyrians, and the good Lord, he knew that they had a purpose too, and he amplified their footsteps. It sounded like chariot wheels rolling and armies marching, and they said, listen to that. Those crazy Israelis have hired the Egyptians and the Hittites to come against us. We better get out of Dodge right now. And they left everything they had, their clothes, their mules, their horses, their food, their treasure, and they ran. And the lepers walked into camp. They said, great day in the morning, look at here. They started filling their faces and eating and stuffing gold under rocks and hiding it because they said, man, we've come on to something. They said, well, wait a minute. We can't possibly eat all this. Why don't we go back and tell those people inside the city what we found? We are not going to sit here and die all the South Arkansans. Are we going to sit here and gripe on the vine and let someone else take away our opportunity? Can we not see the future in something like this? That we can actually have our kids, our grandkids right here living in our towns, going to church with us, have their kids in school, and we'll see our economy grow. and we can be energy independent, and no one can tell us, America, we don't like it, we're going to turn the valve on. Instead of importing 60% of our oil, we can cut that number down. And it'll still be some imported oil, but what we can create will blend with anything that line oil can produce. Steve Cousins went with us to UT Arlington. We said, how does line oil feel about this? They said, we want every drop of crude that you can create, because we know we'd have a stable supply, and it would be at a reasonable price. And that $40 range is really closer to $37, but we like to make it easier for my mind. And so at $40, and if it's trading at $80 on the market, you get it for half the price, and you've got an opportunity for job creation. I think it's what we need to do. And I ask for your prayers as we meet with the governor Monday morning, that we'll be careful in what we say. Politics is a strange game. I love it. But, you know, we got to be careful we don't paint someone into a corner. And Governor Barr over here, he's been interested in our program. I thank you for coming tonight, Governor. And because of what we need to do, we need to be careful that we don't make someone alienated in the system, because just like I want it to happen, there are other people on the other side of the table that say it's not a good thing. But I don't see them riding a stick horse or burning a candle either. I think they like the nice things that we all enjoy. They like to drive cars, have electricity, and the fine things of life. But again, those are the things we've got to compete against. So we can do it right. ADEQ will make sure it happens. The federal law says you're going to have to do it. We'll make sure that occurs. And it's the right thing to do. It'll be job creation. Any questions or comments? Have I thoroughly bored you to tears? Yes, sir.
Very good presentation, by the way. So good, in fact, that I'm afraid when I'm fixing to ask you, people might throw stuff at me. But I just got to know.
All right.
Curiosity's got me. Whenever you take the overburden off and you go after the product, the lignite, it may be 30 foot thick, right? Now, when you get ready to put everything back, where's that going to come from?
What you dug off was, it's been compacted through the millions of years. I don't know how old the earth is, but it's been here a long time. And so we dig it and we renovate it, or we lift it up, cultivate it, is how we call it on the Campbell. We cultivate the crop. We're lifting that up. But as you put it back with the D9 dozers and all the heavy equipment, it's not going to be sitting there all fluffed up. It's still going to be tightly packed enough that it won't shrink. But yet the timber or the grasses will grow through that, what once was a hard pan, and will enable itself to grow in a quicker environment. And those timber plantations, I didn't show you that slide. I've got it here printed off. They planted pine trees 4 foot by 4 foot. Around here, most of the timber plantings that I saw on the way down here today are in rows 10 foot to 12 foot apart and 6 foot spacings. So you get about a 35% larger density per acre for the timber grower, because his timber can grow faster. I've had that question asked before. It doesn't shrink away. I asked the same thing. And they did, and I looked at it at South Dakota, and it's more arid out there, and yet they're digging coal down to 150 to 300 foot deep in deep seams, and the huge equipment bringing that out, and that train, as it pulls under that conveyor, it never stops moving. It's moving 1 mile per hour, and they're dumping exactly the same amount of weight in each gondola that's coming back to our plants at Redfield and other places here. So the good Lord put it there for us to use. We know we can do it, and we can put it back like it was and do it actually better. And you know, that's what we need to do. I'm an environmentalist just like anyone else, but it's not going to contaminate our water system. We're not going that deep. And there will be monitoring there on that site. In addition to those $30 per hour jobs, there will be people there making 6-digit salaries that are watching what happens from the geology standpoint and from the ADEQ people that are watching what we do. And they're going to make sure, and the mining company's going to make sure, that they don't violate the contract. They don't have to pay that money that they've got in escrow to make sure the landowner is protected. That's a good question. Yes, sir.
Is this basically the same thing that we have over Mount Pleasant?
Actually, I think ours is a little bit better quality of mineral, but it's the same thing. Yes, sir.
I mean, you can see what's taking place in Mount Pleasant.
Yes, sir.
Maybe it's the same basic thing.
That's exactly right. And it looks horrible while they're digging it. That pit looked horrible to look at, but after the fact, 3 years later, it looks pretty good to me. And it's a whole lot of economy. I think you could testify to that for your area. Yes, sir.
One more comment to myself, but in all of our infinite wisdom of those of us in the adult world here tonight and through our lifetime, and our awareness of
question. Well, I have to tell you that from proven fact, in the Second World War, Adolf Hitler did a very good job of making it work. He almost won the war. And his technique was not nearly as carefully refined as what we're doing now. We're not doing something that's in the food chain. I don't think we need to make fuel out of corn. It's inflated the price of corn, but it's made our prices of our products on the shelf go up as well. If you look in the pantry, everything's got something from corn or part of the corn derivative involved in it. This is not something we're eating. Neither are we eating the coal. But coal can be converted to this as well. It just takes more pressure and it's more involved. And we don't have any coal to that level in Arkansas, but we have the lignite. It's the right time. With gasoline projected to go to that $5 per gallon, we could keep that price lower because we'll have a larger supply. And it's all about supply and demand. And I know that makes it sound simplistic, but it really is. The more we have to produce to satisfy that need, if we get a vehicle to get 200 miles per gallon, there'll be somebody else that'll have one that'll get 10 miles per gallon. And so there's going to be a demand for the product, whatever. But as long as that price is staying where it is, and we're not finding any other large reserves that we can produce under that $40 barrel again, then it's the right time to do that. But Americans and Arkansans are innovators. We'll find better ways. We can make diesel fuel from algae and a catfish pond, but it's costly to do that. We can make it from soybeans. But we can make diesel fuel from this. We can capture the carbon, the vanadium, the mercury, the sulfur, those things as we're breaking it down and can be sold in other opportunities as well as byproducts. And it's the right thing to do. Was there a question on this side? Yes, sir.
I have four questions I ask you too. Part two, how will this be any
to a more level playing field with some of the larger institutions? So with this combination of our new science center, check out our website if you haven't yet. It's a nice new large building, 60,000 square feet, along with this research building that sits technically behind it, but we don't like to think of ourselves as behind the Science Center. Gives us a research facility that will rival just about any four-year institution in the state. There is a snapshot of our research building. It sits, I should say, west of the Science Center, not behind the Science Center, shouldn't it? It's a $2 million facility, 3,800 square feet of dedicated lab space, and I think that's where the Natural Resources Center niche really will reside for the mining. You know, when they mine the coal samples themselves, they're going to need to know what's in those samples. We could probably do that with a bit more funding, hiring the folks that are a bit more experienced at that than maybe the faculty are at SAU. However, that big place in North Dakota, they're already ready to go, and I honestly don't know that we can really compete in that arena with those folks up there. They do a wonderful job at what they do. But there will be lots of things that need to be done in South Arkansas. The leftovers after the synthetic process, those will need to be analyzed if there's any heavy metals or something like that, or if there are maybe some rare earth elements that might need to be recovered for industrial purposes, we could analyze for those as well. So without going too deep on any of these, because I know everybody's going to start checking their phones and text messaging and things like that if I get too deep, but with the array of instrumentation that we have, we can do pretty much something on any sample that comes along. Some of these pieces of equipment like the UV-Vis, FTIR, and the energy dispersive x-rays, they are kind of quick scanning tools at the start. Somebody sends us a sample, we want to know quick what it is without having to spend too much money on it. We put it in there first. If it looks like we need to, we send it out into TOC. That'll be a very big player in water quality for all those well samples that get sent around for analysis during the mining process.